Welcome to Esa Man, the podcast for anyone who knows the roller coaster of living in a new country. Whether you're crying alone in your bedroom with no friends, don't worry, we've all been there, or can't get over the fact that this is the awesome life you live. This is your place to laugh, learn, and feel a little less alone on this wild ride. I'm your host, Kat, just a regular American living in Ecuador, figuring it all out one very baby step at a time. From epic language fails to humbling life lessons, I'm here to share my journey and help you navigate yours. On this show, we'll laugh, cry, and maybe even cringe a little as we dig into the real, messy, hilarious truth about life abroad. Ready for a good laugh? Great. Vámonos, baby. Hello, and welcome to the Esa Man podcast. I am your host, Catherine McGreevy, and welcome to the inauguration of Esa Man. Oh my God, y'all. I am so excited. I never knew that this day would come, and here I am with a microphone in front of my face and a pop something. I forget the name. I didn't even know what that was a few weeks ago, and we're doing a mother truckin' podcast. So if you guys are coming from Instagram, I just want to say thank you for your support, and I am so excited to get to show you guys a little bit more of me, my life, and the things that have really worked well in living abroad and traveling around. We're going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about fun things. Y'all, I love talking. My friend recently told me I have the gift of gab, and maybe she was just being nice, but here we are gabbing. So without further ado, I want to start off my first podcast talking about the question that I get probably on a daily basis. Why are you in Ecuador? And so, y'all, I'm not even kidding. If you open up my DMs, there'll be people are like, hey, just curious. Why are you in Ecuador? Next one. Hey, my name is such and such. I saw you're living in Ecuador. Why? And so, y'all, let's talk about it. And so let's go back. I don't even know how many years. So let's go back to Catherine in high school. So I grew up in Irmo, South Carolina. I was born in North Carolina. I have a sister who is 2 years older than me. And yeah, it's pretty much sums up that and my family, my parents. But I grew up in Irmo, South Carolina. Like I said, anybody here from Irmo, South Carolina or live in Irmo, South Carolina? Please comment if you are or live, like if you live there or if you have or if you have any relation to Irmo, South Carolina. I am so curious. But anyways, I had done the trips with my family, the all-inclusive resorts in the Caribbean, and was very fortunate. But y'all, I mean, let's be honest here. Going to an all-inclusive resort in Jamaica, like, you ain't getting the culture. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, that was my version of traveling a few times. And then, occasionally the Disney trip. But I didn't really grow up in a family that was very like, oh, let's go to a museum in Germany for our next trip. We really honestly kind of stayed local. And now as we've become adults, like our family has become, our family, you can be part of it too, but my family has become kind of more travelers. So anyways, backstory is I really wasn't this big traveler, and I wouldn't say anybody, even in my extended family, was like a big, big traveler. So I know I get that question a lot. It's like, where did this come from? And to answer your question, I don't know. And so, I mean, I kind of know. So it kind of started, my first big trip abroad was one of my friends in high school. Her mom was from France. And her mom had to go do work over in France for the summer for 3 weeks. And she invited me to go with her, which looking back, y'all, what an opportunity of a lifetime. Pretty much most of my expenses paid for, such a cultural experience. And I just think I was almost too young to really appreciate it, even though I wasn't even that young. So it was my sophomore year of high school. And we went for the summer. We went for 3 weeks. And at that time in my life, 3 weeks felt like for effing ever. And I remember getting over there and I didn't really have that much contact because at that time, iPhones weren't really a thing. It was a little bit harder to connect with people overseas, but it was like Facebook messages. It was still definitely an option, but it was a lot harder than it is now. So I remember being on, I think it was my iPod Touch. Or did I have an iPod Touch? No, I think it was my iPod Touch. Something, I think. Maybe. Anyways, I'm pretty sure. But I remember sending messages on Facebook, like when I had Wi-Fi. But anyways, fast forward, I went on that trip and y'all, it's not that I didn't enjoy it, but I don't think I appreciated being in France at that age because I loved my friend that I went with. And I think just coming back, I was just like, I don't see the need to travel. Like that was fun. Don't need to do it again. I wouldn't go back to France, which now I've been back several times and I would never say that now. But yeah, I think it was just at that moment of my life, there was a boy that I liked and 3 weeks felt like my whole summer. So I kind of was like, wrote traveling abroad off. And then fast forward to my senior year of high school, I was in an AP European history class that I dropped out of after the second day because I said, F no. I was in other AP classes and I was like, I ain't trying to struggle through this one. So anyways, we being me, decided to still go on the AP European history field trip to Italy, even though I did not take the class. And I went on this field trip. Anyways, it absolutely changed my life. And that kind of reopened my eyes to traveling abroad. And that kind of leads me to college where I decided to study abroad in Spain. I had the time of my life. And during my summers in college, I also taught English in Thailand. And that was absolutely life-changing. And so just having those experiences, I knew that I wanted to go abroad after school, after college. And I had already done a lot of Europe. I'd already been to Africa, like not a ton. And I'd already done a lot in Asia. And I was like, I would really love to do South America. So for me, I was able to graduate early from college. I went into college having enough credits to graduate a year early, but I wasn't trying to like be an adult too soon. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, I decided to graduate 6 months early and backpack. And so I remember graduating and I telling everybody, I'm going to go backpack. I'm going to go backpack. People were like, you're a solo female traveler. What the heck are you doing? And every time I told people that I want to go to South America, they would be like, oh, but it's so dangerous. Like, what are you going to do there? And honestly, the majority of the responses I got was, it's dangerous. Like, that's not a good idea. And if you know me, you know that only fuels the fire because I had already traveled a good chunk before even deciding on doing this solo backpacking trip. And I just believe that the world is as scary as you make it. And I don't buy that every country is dangerous. I don't buy that you're going to step off a plane and immediately get shot, you know, and granted, I'm sure there's places that would happen. Yes, of course. But I just believe that, you know, people live in all these countries. And I even remember in Thailand, I had the opportunity to work with these Pakistani refugees. And it was just so cool hearing their stories and then knowing people who still go to Pakistan. And so anyways, my eyes have just been really open the more that I've traveled. And so for me, when people told me like it was dangerous, I was like, okay, thanks, but I'll take that into consideration. Not. I was looking at Costa Rica. Well, actually, it all started with I knew I wanted to travel and I wanted to have fun, but I also wanted a part of me to do something that was giving back. And so I decided I looked for different English teaching programs because I saw that was a way that I could volunteer. And I saw an English teaching program in Colombia, in Ecuador, and in Chile. And I think I applied to all of them. And honestly, the one that just like I interviewed with and got back to me quickest was the one in Chile. And so I was like, all right, sure. And so I filled out this application. It was going to start in April. I filled out this application and they ask you where you want to be placed. Like, do you have a preference? Because there's different regions of Chile. It's very long if you didn't know. And do you want to be in a city? Do you care to be in the country? Like, what are your preferences? Y'all, me as a naive, how old was I? I was 21 years old when I filled that out. I was like, put me in your most vulnerable communities. I'm open to do whatever. Y'all, let me just tell you, that'll be a story for another day, actually. Because let me just tell you, when I finally got placed, I pulled it up on Google and it was a road. It was just a road was the Google image search. And I was like, shit. Anyways, that is a story that I will get into in another episode. So I always knew I had to be in Chile by April. So my plan was I had 3 or 4 months to 3 months to travel. Actually, I had 3.5. So I always knew I had like 3.5 months to travel by myself before I had to be in Chile for my kind of orientation week in Santiago. So I was looking at different things and I looked at this working at this hostel for 3 months in Costa Rica. They had a minimum of 3 months where you can, basically they give you room and board. And this is another thing that I want to talk about. There are so many ways you can travel and save money and not honestly spend money. And so one of the places was this surfing hostel. LOL, I'm not a surfer, but I wanted to be. And anyways, I interviewed with them. They had like an interview process. It was official. They interviewed me and they said, yeah, come for 3 months. You get free room and board, aka they give me a bed and a shared dorm room with the other volunteers, and then they give me food. And so I was like, great. Yeah. I don't know what happened, y'all. I read this article at one point in my life that was like top 10 places to travel that are cheap, and Ecuador was on the list. And for some reason, I just had Ecuador in the back of my mind. And I don't know what at this point caused me to stop thinking about Costa Rica and start thinking about Ecuador. All of a sudden, I was like, 3 weeks is a long time. Instead of doing 3 weeks in Costa Rica, I could do like Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and then end up in Chile, potentially Bolivia, which looking back, that's a little, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for? I got a little ahead of myself, you could say. If I really wanted to do it on bus and like travel around and do it right. But I decided I'm going to buy a one-way ticket to Ecuador instead. And so your girl booked a one-way ticket to Ecuador. I found a hostel, the Secret Garden, that I said, you know what? I am going to travel here and I'm going to volunteer. They had a minimum requirement of a month. They gave me free room, like my bunk bed, and they gave me 2 meals a day, which is actually really good when it comes to volunteer programs. And I was like, all right, let's do this. A few days, I ended up buying my flight. And that's the thing, is like nobody tells you that the scariest thing is just like actually booking the flight. Like you can talk about wanting to go abroad, traveling abroad, but like at the end of the day, y'all, you gotta do it. And so I ended up booking the flight, a one-way ticket to Ecuador. And I remember everybody was like, what are you doing? What is your plan? That sounds so dangerous. And I think so many people tried to talk me out of it, out of their own discomfort and fear for me, based on things that they had maybe heard about South America or Latin America or whatever it may be. And once again, like I said, that just adds fuel to my fire. I really wanted to conocer. I really wanted to I really wanted to explore South America and explore another part of the world. So anyways, had my one-way ticket. I saw that I had a layover in Bogota, which let me tell you, I did not call it that before. I thought it was Bogota. Yikes. I can't even believe I'm admitting that out loud. Anyways, I remember flying up to New York. I hopped on a plane, Avianca baby, and I flew to Bogota, which was supposed to be my layover to Ecuador, and I just got off the plane. What? That kind of was like a new revelation. I decided to do that a few days before my trip to Ecuador, and I remember my parents being really nervous for me, but they didn't really say it. They were just more of like, okay, what are your plans? And I was like, oh, I don't know, because I really didn't know. Like as a backpacker, you don't know. I mean, to be fair, I planned a little bit more than I would plan at this point in my life, but I'm on the plane and I really wasn't scared. But I remember landing in Colombia and being on the plane. It was like 6 a.m. and all the things people had told me decided to just arrive in my mind. Be careful of the taxis. Getting a taxi from the airport could be dangerous. You're going to get robbed as a solo female traveler. So many things could happen to you. All of these thoughts just started piling up in my head as I'm sitting in the airplane. And I'm like, this was the shortest, longest flight of my life. I do not want to get off this plane. What the beep am I doing? And I don't want to do this. And it was just so crazy. So fast forward, you got to put one foot in front of the other. And I got off the plane because they wouldn't have let me stay on it anyways. And, I went through immigration, and the scariest part to me for some reason was the taxi situation. Because when you Googled online, people are like, be careful, like they'll take you to the ATM Express thing where like, they kidnap you and take you to all the ATMs or they'll overcharge you or, you just hear these horror stories and that the ones that aren't in the official line are not good. And so I literally thought all the ones who weren't official taxis were literally going to like hurt me in some way. I got in line, got in my taxi, and I got to my hostel, and like life was fine. And then I remember getting to my hostel and somebody came in and was like, I just got robbed. And I was like, holy shit, what am I doing? And I remember like being at reception and like, yeah, the terrace is up there if you want to go to the terrace, if you want to like meet other people, all these things. And so anyways, I was terrified because I don't know, like social anxiety. And so I just kind of stayed in my room. And anyways, I ended up actually meeting some really cool people and I had such a great time. So my time in Colombia came to an end and I went to Ecuador. And that is when basically we're 15 minutes into this and this is where the journey starts. I was volunteering at the Secret Garden, Quito, and I basically worked only like 4 hours a day. It was so easy. I made drinks. I was a bartender, which if you guys know, I did not drink for a really long time in my life. I just was never really a big partier. I was none of that. But hey, backpacking days they brought out a different side of Catherine. I was kind of reinventing myself as I was backpacking, which once again, story for another day. But yeah, and so I remember being there. I was LOL bartending at night. And then when my shift were in the morning, I was serving breakfast. And y'all, I had the absolute best time of my life. The other volunteers were so amazing. So if you're ever considering traveling and you're like, hey, backpacking's hard, because honestly it is. You're picking up, you're having conversations with the same conversations every 3 days with new people, packing up your suitcases. And honestly, it gets old. So this volunteer situation was so amazing because you're kind of staying put for a month. Well, what I thought was going to be a month ended up staying a little bit longer. So anyways, at that time, there were 3 receptionists and one of them is Diego, which is my now husband. What? So, oh my God, I'm just like picturing it right now. This is so crazy. And so anyways, I met the receptionist. I'm working there and really no big deal, whatever. I actually didn't talk to Diego much. I think when I first came, he was on his days off. I just remember, I don't know why, I just have always been like a girl's girl. So I didn't really try to get to know him because in my mind, I was like, oh, like the volunteers, or like the kitchen ladies, the chefs, they were so fun. And mind you, I did not speak really any Spanish, but we had a blast. And to this day, they invite me to like their very intimate birthday parties. And oh my God, y'all, I have such a special place in my heart for them. And I had such a blast with the other volunteers, with the staff members of the hostel. And there was a point where Diego and I started to talk, but he had a girlfriend. And let me just tell you, I did not think of him like that. Not to mention, this was pretty much my first stop on my trip around South America. Granted, I did stop in Colombia before that, but this was my first official stop. It was so crazy because yeah, like I said, he had a girlfriend. So it almost made it so organic maybe in that way because I did not see him as anything. And so anyways, one of the volunteers, y'all are about to be like, what is up with Catherine? She's got a weird sense of humor. And guess what? You're right. So welcome, baby. There was this volunteer. She was from Brazil. She was amazing. We really hit it off. And I loved embarrassing her in front of other guests. And one point, she walks out of the bathroom. Oh my God, this isn't even funny. Well, actually, I don't know. This is not Ecuadorian humor either. So that's where I'm going to lose half of you guys. You're going to be like, what? This is not funny at all. This is disgusting. So anyways, she walks out of the bathroom and I just remember there were a ton of guests standing by the it was like a common area and there was a bathroom to the side. And I just remember her stepping out and I was like, hey, Anna, is your stomach feeling better? I thought I was hilarious. She didn't get it. She was like, what? She's like, my stomach doesn't what? And I was like, yeah, is your stomach feeling better? And obviously insinuating she was having stomach problems in the bathroom, which I thought was hilarious. And so fast forward, I'm telling this story to Diego up at reception and we're with Anna as well. And she's so just like, this is stupid. And Diego dies laughing. He thinks it's hilarious. Thank God. We start to literally try to humiliate each other in front of other people. Somehow Diego gets on my Facebook and he makes a status asking for recommendations because I have food poisoning. And he said, too much cuy for me, which is guinea pig. I ate too much guinea pig. And that's what upset my stomach. And so many things. We joked about kidney stones, literally just any kind of potty issue. We thought it was hilarious. And so we really just became really good friends. And I know, to some of you guys, you're like, yeah. But honestly, in my head, I never looked at him as anything more. And because like I said, he had a girlfriend. I forget when it was, but I ended up extending my trip a little bit. And I was like, wow, this is so fun. I'm having such a good time. And so I stayed for probably a month longer before I was like, all right, I gotta go. I can't be here forever and I need to go to Peru. So I bust my way down like through Cuenca to Peru. I'm going down the coast of Peru in bus. Mind you, I also got my phone stolen in Ecuador. What was I thinking? I was backpacking solo and I didn't have a phone for like a month, which is crazy because I was like, oh no, I had insurance on my phone in the US, but they would only send it to Chile. So I was like, I'll just wait till I like start teaching English in Chile to get my phone, which is like 2 months from that date. I'm backpacking down. There is a flood, y'all. There is a mother trucking flood in Peru and I am in it. My hotel is flooded. There's no buses out. I was in a hostel. We had to move because the hostel had to shut down. Then we were in a hotel. It's a story for another, like, crazy story. But basically, I remember my parents were like, please, for the love of God, Catherine, please get out of Peru. Because there was a time in Peru that it was like, the first time in 100 years that this is happening or whatever it may be. I remember my parents were like, would you please just leave? Like, go back to Ecuador. You know people there. You're safe. And in my head, I was like, no, but I still want to go to Bolivia. And I really wasn't talking to Diego much, but we were like occasionally talking, like, but literally like, oh, how's your stomach doing? Like, lame, y'all, lame. I decided to go back to Ecuador, even though I really want to go to Peru, but there's like this visa thing. And I only had like a little bit of time because I ended up being stuck for like 2 weeks. So kind of slowed down my plans a little bit. I go back to Ecuador and I decide I'm going to volunteer until basically my time in Chile, because at this point, the flood kind of ruined a few things. And I don't know. I wasn't super mad about it either. So I volunteer there. Diego and I are just like really close. And there's a part of me that's like, oh my God, do I like this man? Like, what? But I was like, no, like he has a girlfriend. This is not, no. And so I remember even saying certain things to him that was like very much shutting down the potential of us ever getting together. Because I was like, no, like, I don't know. And it wasn't like any of us were trying anything, but I just wanted to make it very clear, almost kind of protecting myself that like, we're just friends. So I volunteer in Ecuador for a few more weeks, and then I fly down to Chile where I start my program. Basically in Chile, we had 4 months and then we had summer break. Nope, we had winter break. And then we had another 4 months. Y'all, like I said, when I filled out that form, when I say I went to one of the most vulnerable places, it was tough. That was one of the toughest years of my life. I didn't speak Spanish. I was living with a family from the countryside. And while I did everything in my power to make the most of it, and I do think I did a good job at that, it was really, really tough. And none of my students really cared to be there. I had students who, if they had, like their family had like a harvest, they would just pull them out of school. I had students who were in jail. I remember having a student who they got in a fight, like they were like fight with blood on the floor. And students who were my age, y'all, I was 22 years old and I never told them that because I was so scared that they wouldn't respect me. I mean, they never respected me anyways, but like it'd make it worse. And so it's just crazy. Like at one point, the teachers of the school called me over in the lunchroom and they asked me, they're like, Catherine, come here. And I was like, okay, yeah. And they're like, can you tell us, do cows fly in the United States? And I was like in shock. I was like, what? But I also didn't want to embarrass them because they were being like very honest. And I was like, the US is big. So like in my part of the US, they don't. But I was flabbergasted. And even the students, none of them took it serious. Like the mayor would make you pass students, like crazy, crazy things. And it was a really tough year for me. So anyways, 4 months in, I had my winter vacation for 2 weeks. And I remember my parents were like, tell us where to go. We'll meet you. And I wanted so badly to get out of Chile because I was like, I just need a break. For me, I had such a good experience in Ecuador that I was like, let's go back. I have familiar faces there. I would love to go see them and let's go. And like I said, I hadn't been talking to Diego at all, but fast forward, I get to Ecuador. I meet my family in Ecuador. Which was so special because I was able to show them around. But LOL, if you know anything about Ecuador, I took them to Plaza Foch to eat local cuisine. Local cuisine, my ass. Also kind of sad because Plaza Foch is like kind of like botado now. But anyways, point being is I took them to Plaza Foch, which is like a super touristy area. Like you're never going to have the best meal of your life there. The cocktails are like vibrant colors that should not be that vibrant. And they come. I reconnect with Diego, and at that time, he actually had just broken up with his girlfriend, which is crazy. That's another story as well, I guess. But basically, he had just broken up with his girlfriend, and we it came to a place where I was about to leave, and we were like, I honestly thought that like he was going to get back together with his girlfriend. So I was like, no, this can't happen. And he sends me a message. We ended up talking. And I was literally leaving the next day or 2 days to go back to Chile, which is not that close. It's pretty far still. Like Chile is south, y'all. And I was just like, okay. And so we talked about that we liked each other and that we could just see what happened. But I was super skeptical because he had just gotten out of a relationship. So I was like, okay, like we'll see. Fast forward, I go back down to Chile. We keep talking. He comes to visit me and I'm just in the back of my head. I'm like, how is this going to work? Like how in a perfect world, how do we work out? He lives in Ecuador. My whole point, I think I mentioned that like I taught English in Thailand. My whole thing was I always wanted to get back to Thailand. Like Thailand has like such a special place in my heart. And I really wanted to get back to Asia, live in Asia for a bit. And, you know, he left Chile and then I had 2 or 3 more months of teaching left before I was done with my contract. And I was going back to the US. So I was like, okay, on my way back to the US, I'll visit him in Ecuador. But it was so crazy, y'all, because I joined a Facebook group, which if y'all are ever looking, Facebook, you know, don't write it off. I joined this Facebook group of English teachers in Quito. I got a message within 2 minutes from this man who worked for Fulbright teaching English, and he was a manager and he wanted to know my credentials, what I had done. And I told him, and he was like, yeah, let's schedule an interview. And I was like, this is a scam. What? Also, mind you, I am independent. I'm independent cat. And there was a part of me that was like, I don't want to be that girl that's moving to a country for her boyfriend. And like, how are people going to think? But anybody who knew who I was knows that that's not me, but it still was kind of like weighing heavy on me. So I decided not to tell Diego because we were kind of in this place of like, what are we going to do? And so, but just kind of seeing what happened, I go through the interview process. I get the job and I'm just like, what am I like? Do I accept it? Like, do I move to Ecuador? And so thinking in my head, I was like, well, I still want to keep practicing my Spanish. And, you know, I'm not necessarily done with South America. I could do 1 more year here. And so I was like, let's just see what happens. Let's go. So I remember calling my parents. I was nervous what my parents would think about me saying that I was going to move to Ecuador because obviously you can put 2 and 2 together. And they were like, oh my God, I think that's great. Like they were super supportive. And that honestly was like all the clarity I needed. Like that was all the clarity I needed. I spoke to like a few friends and they were like, this is amazing. I think this is great. Cause everybody just knew who I was. And they're like, I'm not stupid. And especially when it comes to boys, like y'all, I've never been that person. I'm just like, I like to like do my own thing. I decided to move to Ecuador. I called Diego and I was like, hey, I need to book my flight. I forget actually what I said, but I think it said something. I was trying to be dramatic, y'all. I was like, hey, something. I don't even know. But he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I got a job offer. And he was like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah, I got a job offer. I don't know if I should accept it. Working at Fulbright teaching English in Quito. And I decided to move. We had a conversation. We're like, all right, let's see what happens. So I moved to Quito, Ecuador. I came back. So it was Christmas time. I flew back through Ecuador. And then I flew to this and I spent like probably a week in Ecuador. And then I went to visit my family for 3 weeks, sold my car, which was probably one of the hardest things. Like that's like when it really hits, I'm moving abroad. And I sold my car and I moved and I packed up my bag and I moved to Ecuador for a year. LOL. 7 years later. Yeah. And I just started teaching English at Fulbright and, you know, Diego and I was living in my apartment. I had roommates. Yeah. And we were just kind of seeing where things went. So that's kind of how I got to Ecuador. But the crazy thing is that year Diego and I broke up, which was my bad, which will, you know, that'll be part 2 of this story. But that's kind of how I got to Ecuador was I was visiting randomly when I backpacked. I landed on Ecuador, I decided on Ecuador. And then I stayed or I came back because of love. Ew, I kind of hate that I say that out. Like I'm saying that out loud. But really, honestly, like was supposed to be a year thing turned into a 7-year thing. And so absolutely wild. It has been such a wild ride. I've learned so much about myself. I have explored so many things and it's really crazy to say. So I'm 30 years old. I've lived in South America for 8 years now. So almost a third of my life I've been in Latin America. And it's wild, y'all, because I am as white as they come. Like, if you look at me, nobody's going to be like, oh, you have a little bit of Latina in you. Absolutely not. But then I just crack out my Spanish and they're like, yeah, you still don't have any Latina in you. No, I'm just kidding. My Spanish ain't that bad. Yeah, maybe I'll do a podcast in Spanish one day. But no, anyways, here I am in Ecuador and I'm so excited for this journey and I'm so excited to see what happens and what comes of this podcast. And I have so many fun events and things coming. So thank you guys for listening and thanks for tuning in. And I'm just so excited for what's to come. If you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to send them my way. And yeah, I'm sending you guys all un abrazo. Ciao! If you got a good laugh from this episode, make sure to follow the show and share it with a friend who can relate to the highs and lows of life abroad. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram @KatMcGreaves for more stories and tips about life in Ecuador and beyond. See you next time. Ciao, ciao!